Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Future for Nature Awards. Always such a special day in our year. I was hoping to bring a little bit of rain with me from Africa because, it's always a blessing when it rains, and I was really looking good at the beginning of this week, but it's just let me down completely today. Anyway, beyond that, it's wonderful to see so many allies of the wild, nature lovers in this room, rain-kissed or not, and thank you all so much for joining us here today. Well, our event this year is sandwiched between two planetary markers. The first happened last week, which was that extraordinary solar eclipse that was viewed across North America, and I believe one of our photographers actually took some photographs of it. He was there, he saw it. And the second is happening on Monday next week, April the 22nd, which is Earth Day. Both of these are reminders to me of the beautiful spherical nature of our planet, and also why it is so important to protect the nature on our planet. And so in many ways, this is a really wonderful, auspicious time to be welcoming our three new winners to the Future for Nature family. We have Callie Veelenturf, who is protecting leatherback turtles and other marine species in Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador. We have Rinzin Lama, who's been doing incredible work protecting snow leopards in the most remote northeastern corner of Nepal. And then Hana Weaver, who has done the most incredible job hauling the Puerto Rican sharp-shinned hawk back from the brink of extinction. It's also a real pleasure to welcome our guest of honor today, John Liu, who's come all the way from Beijing to join us and has spent the last few decades regenerating devastated landscapes and bringing a beautiful green sheen of hope back to life. A very big welcome to all of you, and of course to everybody who's also joining us on the live stream. Well, I've been reading some wonderful books lately by a fantastic science writer called Ed Yong. And he reminds us that all complex life on our planet, everything from algae to dinosaurs, and every single one of us in this room evolved from a single ancestor 2 billion years ago. It all came down to one breathtakingly improbable moment that's never been duplicated successfully since. When a single-celled bacterium in the original primordial soup somehow merged with an even simpler form of life called an archaeon. Instead of being broken down into nutrients by its captor, the bacterium was somehow domesticated, losing its free-living existence to become entrapped forever within its host. And this unlikely event became the greatest symbiotic event of all time, where two great domains of life, the bacteria and archaea, merged together to create a brand new third domain of eukaryotes, which led to all complex life on Earth from then on as we know it. Well, since then, Earth has been literally teeming with billions of species, large and small, from microbes to mammals, fungi and plants, flying, soaring, swimming, burrowing and burbling, and each one of them tapping with their own specialized sensory focus into the sights and textures, the sounds and tastes, the smells and vibrations and the electric and magnetic fields of our planet. And then communicating all of these experiences enthusiastically in their own particular way to their own kind. And we, of course, are no different. Like every other species, we only perceive a tiny little sliver of that extraordinary fullness of reality. But thanks to the progress of technology and things like artificial intelligence, that is now beginning to change. So, elephants see, hear, and smell the world very differently from us. And they have this incredible ability to communicate. use rumbling at frequencies that are way below human hearing, picking up vibrations and interpreting them through the soles of their feet, and sliding through a single 8 different octaves in a single scream. One of our previous laureates for Future for Nature, called Lucy King, actually managed to isolate a single word in elephant language, which meant beware of bees. Well, one of our new researchers at Save the Elephants, called Mickey Pardo from Colorado State University, has now taken this idea of words and communication to a new level. Using artificial intelligence to analyze the calls that pass back and forth between elephants, he's discovered that they have specific voice labels when they're trying to hail a different individual, which suggests that they call each other by name. And this is absolutely groundbreaking stuff. There's a similar study going on in the Dominican Republic where whale researchers are starting to unravel the complicated clicks and vocalizations used by sperm whales. And they've thrown everything at it. Drones with hydrophones, robotic fish, underwater listening stations, films of whale-animal interaction, and of course satellite tracking, hoping that they can match particular patterns in the sounds to specific interactions and behavior, and then using AI to unravel any kind of potential meaning. Well, studying elephants is a lot easier than trying to find that out in Wales. But I have to say, absolutely fascinating either way, and I'm really looking forward to hear what they discover. Because what's so exciting here is that it gives us this possibility of one day maybe cracking the code that allows us to start communicating with animals in their own language, and revealing what really goes on in their minds. Because if we can understand them better, then we can really start to meet their needs from their perspective with a lot more empathy. And this will help us shift away from this role of being a conqueror more to being a custodian, or moving away from conflict towards coexistence. And all of this really does give me hope, because being battered as we are every day with the 24-hour news cycle, which is pretty overwhelming, especially with the kind of stuff one's hearing about today, I have the words of another great American science writer rattling around in my head, the entomologist E.O. Wilson. And I'm going to try and say it in an American accent, so please forgive me. But what he says is, the real problem with humanity is that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. We're a mixed up and in many ways archaic species in transition. And that kind of sums it up, right? I mean, those caveman emotions that are so prevalent these days on social media, medieval institutions, like our religions and churches, all have been on full display lately. But what about that godlike technology part? That may yet end up to be a blessing rather than a curse. Because as we all know right now, there is so much that needs to be done. There's so much at stake. And while Earth Day is a very interesting gauge for us to go back to see how far we've come, there's still so much more that needs to be done, and we need solutions fast. Which is why, of course, today is always such a special event, where we have the pleasure to honor each year 3 new winners of the Future for Nature Awards, who bring so much passion and energy and so many good new ideas to the table. They are these young, bold cartographers of conservation, charting a brave new course into a future where humanity and nature really can coexist in more harmony. So I'm enormously grateful, as always, to celebrate their successes again today at this wonderful award event, and it all comes down to the extraordinary generosity of our sponsors. First of all, Burger Zoo and the Burger Zoo Conservation Foundation, whose support continues to take Future for Nature from strength to strength. There's also Fondation Segre, the Fred Foundation, the Royal Van Wyer Paint, Ask Your Travel, the Otter Fund, and Foundation New Avada, all of whom we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to. And last but not least, we have the extraordinary team at Future for Nature and all of the volunteers who have been working around the clock to make this event happen. So thank you all so very much. Well, now is the time that I love best, where we head out into the wild to go and meet our 3 new winners in situ, where they can show us a little bit more about what they do, and also to visit some of the places where our Future for Nature family are literally changing the world. So we start near the remote Chiloé Islands off the coast of Chile, where Barbara Galetti is monitoring blue whales and other pelagic giants. Last year, she came across a pod of southern right whales with a newborn calf, and she recently sent us this gorgeous footage of it playing in the water. Well, that particular footage turned out to be rather catalytic, bringing a consortium of marine conservationists together in Chile to write and present a letter to the Chilean government urging them for immediate action to improve conservation measures to protect marine species in Chilean waters. So fingers crossed, looking forward to hear what happens from that. Well, now we head north, across the forests of Ecuador and Colombia, to the land bridge that is Panama, to meet our first winner of this year's Future for Nature Award, Callie Veelenturf. Well, the first thing I realized about Callie when I met her is that she really is full of surprises. She comes from the northern part of Northern America, but works across 3 countries in South America and plans to expand further. From a Dutch perspective, she has a rather small stature, but boy, oh boy, does she pack a lot into a powerful punch. And although she looks rather like an autumnal forest fairy, her happiest place is being somewhere inside or near the ocean. I think my favorite thing about her, though, is that she's one of those rare sensory creatures who is a synesthesiast, which means that all of her senses are cross-wired in her brain. So music dances around her head in a wonderful array of colorful clouds. And my name, Saba, apparently has a radiance of yellow and orange and red colors all around it, a bit like an African savanna that gets stronger the more we talk. But green, the word green, is actually purple, black, and blue, which is all rather confusing. Turtles, on the other hand, which are the great love and passion of her life, are a calm, cool, royal blue-black color with shades of rain and deep ocean. And they sit in stark contrast to her reaction to injustice, which is army green and hot and very uncomfortable, and triggers in her this compulsive need to right a wrong. Well, life has thrown a fair amount of adversity in her path, but rather than crush her, it's honed her into an ever sharper tool. The numbers she's been quoting at us this week are simply staggering. 40,500 turtles caught in fishing gear off the coast of Ecuador just in 2018, or training 2,500 soldiers from Panama's Air and Navy Service to combat illegal wildlife trade. It's also staggering to me how one person can do so much. But as I already said, she's full of surprises, and that sensory cross-wiring seems to fuel an incredible creativity that she applies to the natural world. Well, one last thing before I invite her up onto the stage. Please take note of what she's wearing. It's called a mola and was a gift from an ocean ally in Panama. So I'd like now to welcome the sister protector of turtles, as she's known, onto the stage to tell her own story. Welcome, Callie.
Thank you, Saba, and good afternoon, everyone. What an honor it is to share a space with so many people that share a passion for the conservation of nature. I have always known that the protection of nature was my calling. I spent many hours as a child out in nature catching frogs, turtles, and snakes behind my childhood home and my grandparents' farm in the United States. I always felt at home in nature, no matter where I was. And I also remember understanding from a young age that society, humanity, has an unhealthy relationship with nature and feeling this burning desire inside to do something about it. On my 18th birthday, I saw a sea turtle for the first time, Rinzin Lama. And it was an experience that changed my life. I was snorkeling on a coral reef and following a triggerfish when I saw a shadow out in front of me. And when I looked up, there was this great green sea turtle just floating in the water column. We shared a soulful eye contact that felt like it lasted for minutes, and I felt like it was a communication that crossed the language barrier. In that moment, I felt this wave of understanding, connection, and responsibility to learn everything that I could about sea turtles and the threats that they face, and figure out how I could spend my life protecting them. I became fascinated by leatherback sea turtles. The largest leatherback turtle ever found was 2.8 meters long and over 900 kilograms in weight. There's 7 subpopulations of the leatherback turtle throughout the world in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, and they make these great oceanic migrations during the course of their lifetimes. They also use nesting and foraging sites in different countries over the course of their lives, which means that they require international conservation approaches to be fully protected. After all, nature knows no country boundaries, right? Leatherback turtles are also keystone species, which means that they play a very vital role in the functioning of healthy ocean ecosystems. Leatherbacks can consume their weight in jellyfish every single day. And this is important because jellyfish consume juvenile fish and fish larvae. So when we have healthy leatherback populations in oceanic ecosystems, they play a natural control on jellyfish blooming events, which then supports healthy fish stocks. So in this sense, leatherback turtles are a great support to fishing communities because they support healthy ocean resources. And in this sense, they're also a fisherman's best friend. Upon seeing my first leatherback turtle in the wild in Costa Rica in 2015, I remember being struck by their prehistoric sounding breaths. This was the only leatherback turtle that I would see during my first 3-month internship, and I remember feeling as though I was personally witnessing the extinction trajectory of an ancient reptile. As I watched her return to the sea, I remember seeing white lights on the horizon of the industrial fishing fleet. And it really struck me that conservation programs for sea turtles around the world largely focus on nesting beaches on land. But the major threat facing this species is out on the ocean, where they're drowning in gill nets in disturbing quantities. In the 1980s, there were around 35,000 leatherback turtles in the East Pacific, from Mexico to Chile, foraging and nesting. And unfortunately today, there are only about 600 individuals left in this population, which represents a decline of over 98%. And as you can imagine, at this point, every turtle counts. So in 2019, I founded the Leatherback Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the conservation of leatherback turtles and other marine species through research, education, and advocacy initiatives, largely focused right now in Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador. We work on other endangered species as well, and we're working to combat fisheries bycatch, of course, combat the illegal wildlife trade, protect turtles from destructive coastal development, and also propose new marine protected areas. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our incredible international team, which really makes this work possible on the ground. Our first proposal was funded by the National Geographic Society to identify and describe sea turtle nesting and foraging sites within the Pearl Islands archipelago in the Gulf of Panama. To date, we have documented over 20 nesting and foraging sites, some new to science, of over 4 species of sea turtles. We have also been documenting the threats that they're facing, such as fisheries bycatch, the illegal consumption of turtle meat and eggs, and the illegal wildlife trade of hawksbill turtle shell, which is used in the creation of spurs for cockfighting. Now I'll share a very personal experience with you. Before heading to the field in Panama, I had an experience that would change the course of my life forever. I was 26 years old, and I was extremely excited to be beginning my first job as a marine biologist after receiving my master's degree. But unfortunately, I walked into a situation where the person in power sexually harassed me for months on end and made me feel unsafe. After 6 months of harassment and trying to resolve the situation by all ordinary means, I had no choice but to take legal action to defend myself. But in this process of legally defending my rights, I learned the power of the truth, justice, and rights-based protection measures. Although there are many problems with the United States court system, I personally felt protected. And in trying to move on in a positive way from this negative experience, I wanted to learn how I might be able to protect nature through defending her rights, as she cannot speak for herself. And I quickly realized that I could not defend the rights of nature the way that I had just defended my own, because the intrinsic rights of nature are largely not recognized within our court systems around the world today. Before heading to the field, I purchased the book, The Rights of Nature, A Legal Revolution That Could Save the World, and I was reading it in my tent on the sea turtle nesting beaches in Panama. Shouldn't leatherback turtles have the right to survive and thrive throughout their ancestral range? I became determined to propose a new rights of nature law in Panama. I made the case to Panama's First Lady, Yasmin Cortizo, and Congressman Juan Diego Vazquez that recognizing the intrinsic rights of nature could be the most impactful way to cause a cascading system effect throughout society to help society find balance with nature. They agreed, and we spent the next 2 years drafting, debating, and revising the law together with Juan Diego's team, the general public, Parliament, and the Earth Law Center. I'm extremely excited to share that the President of Panama signed this law into effect on February 24th, 2022. So this means that nature in Panama now has a long list of rights, including the rights to exist, persist, regenerate her life cycles, be restored, and even have representation in court. This means that any member of the public of Panama can bring about a court case on nature's behalf. Now that we've passed this general law, we're working fervently to implement it. One of our proposed implementation measures is to use the rights of nature framework to manage CMAR, or the Marine Corridor of the Eastern Tropical Pacific. This is a place between Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador where leatherback turtles and many other threatened species migrate, forage, and reproduce. Our team has been learning more about these migrations through the use of satellite tagging of hawksbill turtles, green turtles, and leatherback turtles. And to date, we've been able to use these data sets to propose a new national wildlife refuge to protect a new-to-science foraging site for green and hawksbill turtles. We've also used the data to demonstrate the migration routes of leatherback turtles from nesting sites in Panama all the way to Canada, and also to protect these nesting sites from destructive coastal development planning. Other studies have shown that when leatherback turtles leave their nesting sites in Costa Rica and Panama and migrate south to the coast of Ecuador to feed, they're most at risk to fisheries bycatch. That's why our team in Ecuador is working together with fishermen to devise and test bycatch reduction technologies, such as green LED lights. Green LED lights have been shown to reduce the bycatch of marine turtles by up to 81%. Without significantly affecting target fish catch. And this is because marine turtles and the target species like bony fish, like tuna, they have different visual capabilities. So they literally see different wavelengths of light. So if we place these green LED lights every 10 to 20 meters along a gillnet, it allows marine turtles and other endangered species like mobula and manta rays, shark species like the hammerhead shark, and dolphin and whales to see that the gillnet is in the water column and avoid becoming entangled. It's pretty exciting, right? Our team is hoping that within the next few years, results depending, we'll be able to implement these lights within as many fishing communities as possible. With the generous support of the Future for Nature Award, I will be launching a program called Ocean Guardians for fishermen, because after all, fishermen are on the front lines of leatherback conservation. I love how excited they get. We will be providing informative workshops to fishermen about fishery sustainability, bycatch reduction technologies, the safe handling and release of marine turtles, and the importance of marine turtles in healthy ocean ecosystems. And we're hoping that through education, the fishermen are empowered as ocean stewards. And we'll also be able to continue working with them to map leatherback foraging grounds to best know how to mitigate fisheries interactions. The leatherback turtle has been around for 110 million years. They coexisted with the dinosaurs for 45 million years. And this is their actual size. They survived the 5th mass extinction and are only being threatened now with extinction themselves due to consistent pressures from the human race. They have a right to exist, and we will not let them disappear. Now is the time not to be discouraged by the current state of the biodiversity crisis, but to propose inspiring measures of a moral and ethical nature, like the rights of nature, to make sure that we secure a future for nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Wonderful. Well, leaving our friends now in South America, saving blue macaws and tapirs, giant armadillos and jaguars, we catch a current across the Atlantic Ocean and up around the southern tip of Africa to reach Karen Allen in the Bazaruto archipelago of Mozambique.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen from the Nkulu Foundation, which I subsequently established after attending the 2022 Future for Nature Family Gathering, where I was overwhelmingly inspired by my fellow laureates and the incredible conservation work that they continue to do across the globe. My NGO continues to grow and thrive, where we are focusing on some of the most critical conservation needs across Mozambique, from continuing to protect the endangered dugong to addressing capacity gaps in the marine protected area management space, and also developing coastal community resilience to climate change. So just a warm welcome to this year's winners, a hearty congratulations, and welcome to our family.
And further north, up in Kenya, we go to Samburu National Reserve, where I like to hang out, as does Lucy King, where we meet a family of elephants that we both know very well, enjoying the luscious grass after heavy El Niño rain. We call this female S13 of 93. But to the elephants, her real name sounds something like this. And it's spelt something like this. She's completely unaware of all the work that's going on right now, trying to improve human-elephant relations in North Kenya. So here's Lucy King to tell us a little bit more about it.
Hi everyone at the Future for Nature Award. Thank you so much for supporting us over the last few years. It's been an incredible ride to be part of this amazing family. We're so proud that over the last year we've been sharing our new Human-Elephant Coexistence Toolbox, which is a book, but it's full of 80 different methods of how to live with elephants. And it's a really holistic, amazing route for people to learn the tools, methods, and how to engage with living better with elephants. So we'd be thrilled if you'd help us share it across the continent of Africa and even some of the places in Asia where it's being used. So thank you so much for your support. Please help all of our projects if you can. We're really in need of help. This is a very challenging time for us out in the conservation world. Thank you so much. Bye.
And now we take a quick jump across Africa to Central Africa to catch up with Ophir Drury.
My name is Ophir Drury, and I'm leading the Eagle Network. We do wildlife law enforcement in Central Africa, West Africa, and East Africa. Basically, we are carrying undercover investigations, infiltrating criminal networks of wildlife trafficking, coordinate arrest operations in the field, and managing legal follow-up and legal representation of those cases until we get the traffickers behind bars. We have arrest operations every week, sometimes a few times per week, and our life is never really boring, always interesting and fascinating, and very, very, very fulfilling.
Well, thank you, Ophir. We now leave our friends in Africa, saving crocodiles and Dabraza monkeys, lions and albatross, for a quick marine update from Europe.
It's a really exciting time at the Sea Ranger Service right now. This year we're training 3 times more sea rangers than we normally train. And other than the Netherlands, we are now active in the UK and France. Sea rangers are also leading on large-scale seagrass restoration, and our new ship will be finished to be fully operational by the end of this year. But it doesn't stop there. The next step is that we are applying our model to aviation, mobilizing small aircraft to support conservation work on the ground. Most importantly, I'm really excited for the winners this year. Congratulations, and I look forward to meeting you in person soon.
And on to Asia. Blowing a quick kiss to our laureate in Ukraine, who we'll come back to a bit later, and coming to this amazing spine of mountains around the Himalayas, snow-capped and exceedingly high, to meet our second winner of the Future for Nature Awards, Rinzin Lama. There are some places on Earth that are just too high and too hard for most forms of life. But this hardship and the remote, demanding landscape is exactly what makes these mountains sacred to the people that live there. Descendants of early Tibetan Buddhists, they once believed this high-altitude landscape was the abode of ancient shamanic gods. And although times have changed, they still tell tales of an avenging mountain deity that occasionally takes the form of a snow leopard. In spring, the high-altitude glaciers release rivulets of ice-cold water that nourish the crops which support life. And for the mountain people, these are hard-won blessings from a sacred space that just keeps on giving. An unfolding frontier that's also home to 46 species of mammals recorded so far, from wild yaks to Himalayan marmots, palace cats, black bears, and that most elusive mountain monarch, the snow leopard. It was here that Rinzin was born, into a largely oral culture of subsistence farmers with a barter economy. He was somewhat feral as a youngster, roaming the mountains with a catapult, which honed his naturalist skills while hunting for the pot. But the civil war in Nepal, which came close to luring him into the life of a freedom fighter, changed his direction completely after a stint at boarding school in Kathmandu that fired up his academic bent and set him on a different course. Blessed with expansive lungs, a passion with no limits, and a body built for Himalayan summits, Rinzin brings the critical perspective of the indigenous people to the table, and these iconic cats could not possibly wish for a better champion. Rinzin, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Saba. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a great honor to be here with you all today and share about my conservation journey. So this is Nepal, where I come from, a tiny Himalayan country sandwiched between two big giants, China and India. I belong to an indigenous tribe called Ninba in the Humla district of northwest Nepal. This is the most remote area in Nepal, which is not yet connected to the main national highway. It is not just the most remote area, but this is also the largest landscape outside the protected area network system of Nepal. So you can see, so these different colors are the different category of protected area in Nepal. And I founded IIII in 2021 with a vision to strengthen community-led biodiversity conservation. So I come from a village named Burgaon. Burgaon in Nepali means, Bur means blazing and Gaon means village. So I come from a blessed village where agropastoralism is a dominant life form. So today I'm going to share about 3 key incidences or key movement in my life that changed my conservation career, and today I'm here speaking about that. The first one, my introduction to snow leopard was about snow leopard killing livestock. And this is the most common interaction that most community have. And that is what makes people unhappy and angry. As a kid, I absorbed this attitude and I envisioned snow leopard to be a monster, a giant monster with a supernatural power that hides in the tall rock cliff and creates fear among us. But this fear installed curiosity on me to learn more about this species. The second incident is about spiritual connection with the snow leopard from the story of my grandmother. And it's part of the coexistence, it's part of the relationship between the old traditional communities, indigenous communities, and their natural environment. According to her, snow leopards are considered guardian deity of the alpine meadows. Before venturing into these meadows, one has to please or satisfy the deity, praying for safety of the life and livestock. If someone ignores this fact, or if someone provokes the deity will manifest in the form of a snow leopard and cause harms to livestock. If someone further ignores and further provokes, it will cause more harms to livestock and even bring natural disaster. So this is the spiritual connection that changed my perspective towards snow leopard. It installed a deep sense of admiration and love for this species. So this is me, young Rinzin, in my first job as a trekking guide. So at this stage, I haven't seen snow leopard yet, but the closest I have been one is the painting in the wall. In 2007, I was leading a group of tourists as a local guide in the Limi Valley of Humla. So Limi Valley is the most northern valley in Humla. And from young age, I heard like it is very suitable snow leopard. So after visiting a monastery there, I was walking ahead of the team to look for trails. And down at the base of the tall cliff, I saw two mysterious creatures staring at me. I had no idea what they were, and I was so scared, and I shouted loudly to chase them away. Little later, one of our team members came running saying, "Snow leopard, snow leopard." This sighting, this live encounter was the third moment in my life and a turning point for me that led my journey to the Institute of Forestry, the leading academic institution in Nepal for conservation studies, and my passion for snow leopard. For so many reasons, lack of funding, lack of mentoring, it took me 8 years to start my first field survey on snow leopard after I saw it for the first time. So in 2015, I came back to the area to start my first survey, and among other locations, at the middle of this cliff, there was a narrow corridor not too far from where I saw a snow leopard for the first time. I set a camera, and guess what? Here it is. We have the snow leopard. So this was the first snow leopard I photographed in a camera trap in my region. And interestingly, this was also the first evidence of snow leopard presence outside the protected area network of Nepal. Through camera trap, one of the goals of the camera trapping is to get individual identified. So we try to identify every snow leopard individual as possible. And personally, I personally believe this really helps me build connection with each individual that we identify. And like other big cats or like other wild cats, we generally use their body patterns to identify. And this is every individual have a distinctive body pattern. We generally use the front face section, tail, hands, side body. Here in this leopard, so this is a sub-adult male marking his territory, urinating at the rock. And we call it M1. So this particular individual, the M1, have a very distinctive characters. We use this for identification. After 8 years of my first survey, I capture the same individual in the same location, in the same position, doing the same thing. Very recently, we completed the first population assessment of the snow leopard in our region with the generous support from Rolex Award for Enterprise, Snow Leopard Conservancy, and Third Pole Conservancy. Now we have 25 uniquely identified individual snow leopard in the regions, including this M1. Generally, we only name females because females with cubs, they are the one most vulnerable to predation. They are the one most vulnerable. Females often have burden to feed their cubs with milk and meat. That's why they frequently have to hunt, and that is what brings them in conflict with herders over livestock predation. So this is Gunsang with the 2 cubs. With increasing human footprints, there's increasing pressure on the wildlife. Even in the most remote corner of the high mountains, there's lots happening. Snow leopard is facing constant threats from both anthropogenic and natural causes. And one of the most common threats the snow leopard is facing is lack of wild prey. Largely, this is due to grazing competition with livestock that's forced snow leopard to kill livestock like yak, horse, cattle, goat, sheep. That is what brings this beautiful cat in conflict with local herders. And the situation became more critical when snow leopards are engaged in mass killing. Snow leopards have a tendency of killing multiple animals at once, particularly the female with cubs. And this can be devastating for herders because livestock is considered the capital. And this is often the critical situation because that is what brings the retaliatory killing. On the top of this, increase in infrastructure development, human encroachment and footprints, disease from feral dogs, poaching and illegal trades, and climate change is adding more threat to the existence of snow leopard. So this is our camp at an elevation of 4,200 meters in the first week of October. With changing climate, there is no fixed pattern to weather. And that is what makes the walk more unpredictable. October is the best season for field walk in the high mountains. And because of such changes, it's not just hampering our regular field walk, but it's also affecting our overall project cycle. We often now have to do field walk even in the winter. So this is me with my team at an elevation of 5,000 meters in the middle of the December. We are on our way for a snow leopard survey. So in such late winter, especially in the late winter, so we can go with heavy logistics. So we often have to rely with a very light camping equipment, carrying all our belongings by ourselves and camp wherever we are and wherever it gets dark. So in mountains, the landscape is often vertical. We call it vertical landscape because it takes us several hours to climb up even a distance of 1 kilometer. That is what makes field walk very challenging. And in many cases, we ended up in area where there are no suitable ground for camping. In that case, we have to sleep outside in the open sky with temperature falling below minus 10 degrees Celsius at night. In all those hard times, I never felt even a single moment to quit. And I'm very grateful to all my team members who believe in my ideas, who supported me through all this hard work. And they are the real champion for me. And today I want to dedicate this award to them. Snow leopard monitoring is challenging because they live in the most inhospitable terrain in the earth. But we need this because we need a scientific information about their behavior and their other scientific information for effective conservation planning. I try to blend science with traditional ecological and indigenous knowledge to develop mitigation measures that helps to foster sustainable coexistence between the local communities and snow leopard. So over the years, we have been piloting different interventions. We have been piloting the effectiveness of predator-proof enclosure, light deterrent, guard dog, acoustic devices, improved husbandry practices to help reduce the livestock depredations from snow leopard. And this helps to improve local communities' attitude and perception of what they know about the snow leopard. So, snow leopard is truly a guardian of the high mountain ecosystem. It's a cultural flagship as well as it's an ecological flagship species. Protecting snow leopard have significant conservation implications for other wildlife that they live along. This is very important, and this is the reality, and this is the story that I'm trying to convey to my communities and beyond. So my long-term vision is to promote community-led biodiversity conservation with the goal to strengthen sustainable coexistence between herders and snow leopard in this remote landscape. So I'm grateful today. I'm grateful to Future for Nature Award for recognizing our community effort in biodiversity conservation and providing us with a critical fund that we need to continue our activities in those remote mountains. I truly believe Future for Nature Award is a family that where we all can come together, connect, share ideas, and learn from each other, no matter what species and what landscape we work on. I can imagine my home, these mountains, without the song of the snow leopard. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Such an incredible story. Thank you, Rinzin. Well, now we head off to Vietnam to visit Tai Van Nguyen, who rescued this tiny little pangolin cub, only a week old in September last year, that is now thriving under his care. This little fellow has just transitioned to a diet of ant eggs instead of milk and liquid food, and now at 6 months old, he's much stronger, able to climb on his own, and really starting to get his confidence. And soon, when he's ready, will be able to be released back into the wild. Well, from Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, we then go on to Australia to catch up with Maggie Mermans, who is now working with koalas. And these most iconic animals are now listed as endangered following the devastating wildfires from a few years ago. So it's really good to see this male claiming his territory in this particular rescue center in his new job as an ambassador for his kind. Not only are koalas suffering from the impacts of climate change and habitat loss, but they are extremely vulnerable to disease, things like chlamydia, and human-induced disturbance. Well, Maggie has shared the good news with us that there's some promising development now with vaccines, and she's working hard in that particular area with private landowners trying to improve habitat protection and restore bigger landscapes and get these koalas back into their natural habitat. But of course, things like fires and floods are just symptoms of this much bigger issue that we're facing globally, of a rapidly heating climate. And with that comes the shocking unpredictability and violence of the weather, of seasons changing, and how that then impacts on accelerating biodiversity loss, which of course is impacting so many of the species that the Future for Nature family are trying to save, as well as billions of people who are extremely vulnerable all over the world. And it was exactly this issue that had such a huge impact on our next winner, Hana Weaver. When a hurricane, a Category 4 Hurricane Maria, came ripping down and across Puerto Rico, flattening neighborhoods, crippling the island's power grid, and causing untold damage, leaving close to 3,000 people dead and the rest utterly devastated. The damage was completely off the scale. And for one small hawk, it was hanging by a thread in terms of existence, with only 19 individuals left. Hana is the child of raptor conservationists and has literally been trained up from birth to get involved in their conservation. So she was uniquely placed to respond to this particular disaster. Working under extremely arduous conditions with nothing but her own grit and courage and intuition to push her through, often running completely on empty, she has hauled this species back from the brink of extinction. It is an enormous pleasure and honor to be able to embrace Hana in the Future for Nature family, to shower her with much-deserved appreciation and support. You have done an extraordinary job, Hana. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Saba, for that great introduction, and welcome, everyone. So, I had spent the better part of a morning fighting through a wall of vegetation, chopping with my machete, using my body to push down the vegetation, just completely soaked in sweat, debris of the forest clinging to my hair, razor grass, ferns, vines, all holding me back when all I wanted to do was just move forward. When I broke through that wall and finally took my first unobstructed step into a patch of habitat that was somewhat safe from the hurricane, a unique type of silence fell over the area. And it's a type of silence that, to this day, makes my heart race. And it's the sound, or the silence, at first, that maybe a predator is in the area. And that lets me know that they're there. So I believe I was literally hatched into this life. Growing up in rural eastern New Mexico, the daughter of a raptor conservationist, my childhood was entirely immersed in birds and animals. This is me on my way to feed an Andean condor in a barn full of falcons being raised for conservation. It really started from a very young age. And this was all part of my childhood education, being homeschooled alongside my brother. Being homeschooled meant that I had the unbridled access to the natural world. I could go outside whenever I wanted. I could spend time exploring and learning about nature and being around my animals. I was surrounded by all sorts of animals growing up. And from an early age, I was trusted with the responsibility of caring for them. And through that responsibility, I learned the importance of observation. Not simply observing an animal and describing what it's doing, but observing to learn, to listen and interpret life through their lens. I learned that if I paid enough attention to the little details, the little intricacies of each individual, they would literally tell me what they needed. And from there, all I needed to do was take action and provide it. As I grew, I took these lessons of observation and animal husbandry with me, started my professional career working for the Peregrine Fund, which is where I still work today. I specialized in captive breeding and care of critically endangered raptors, which paired with my background and experiences really well. It gave me the critical tools and skills that I needed. But it wasn't until I was unexpectedly thrown into the deep that all of this really came together. I was asked to go to Puerto Rico after the hurricane to attempt saving a species from the brink of extinction. Now, this hawk occurs in Puerto Rico and nowhere else in the world. They're a forest-dwelling raptor, spending most of their time below the forest canopy. They're well known for their elusive and secretive behavior, which makes them really difficult to find. Evolving on a small tropical island, they're also quite small for raptors. Males weigh just 80 to 90 grams. They're only about that tall. Females are a little bigger. They weigh 160 grams, but they're still pretty small. They also have small nests and only lay 2 to 3 eggs per clutch. From previous monitoring efforts, we knew the population was in decline from threats such as habitat loss, fragmentation, parasitic infections, and an increased frequency of hurricanes from climate change. By 2017, we knew the situation was critical. And at the worst possible moment, Hurricane Maria hit the island and pushed that situation into a full-blown emergency. By 2018, we found only 19 individuals, and within those individuals, just 7 breeding pairs. I had a small core team and a few strategies in mind. When we found a nest, we collected the eggs. We took them away from threats, predators, brought them back to our facility where we incubated, hatched, raised, and then released them back into the wild. When the hawks in the wild found that their nest was empty, they would immediately start building a new nest, lay again, and attempt nesting for a second time. So we knew through captive propagation or captive breeding that this double clutching strategy could work, but it was still a pretty big risk. Yet, if it was successful, this allowed us to double the production of young produced every year. Back at the facility, we checked to see if the eggs are fertile, and then from there, they spend 32 days in an incubator where a very consistent temperature and humidity is kept around the clock. Throughout those 32 days, I worked around the clock as well, waking up every 2 hours throughout the night, constantly throughout the day checking the incubators and the equipment to make sure that the temperature was right, that the humidity was right, and that the eggs were being turned every 1.5 hours or so. Remember, I was working on an island that had just been hit by a hurricane, so infrastructure and power systems were still really unreliable. I had backups, and then for my backups, I had a couple more backups, and just in case those failed, I had some more backups in mind. When the chicks first break the shell, this is when they take their first breath of real, fresh air. And they start breathing, and they start communicating. And this is when I started listening. My first clutch of eggs, my first few clutches of eggs, I really expected that they would hatch on time, on the dot, and if they didn't, then something surely was wrong. But again, I was brought back to my childhood, to the importance of observation and listening. And when I listened, I understood that everything was okay. They just needed more time. And I had to laugh at myself and realize where I was on an island, Puerto Rico. These birds are on island time. Relax. Patience. Everything is going to be okay. So after hatching, these chicks are eager and ready. Within just 4 hours of coming out of the shell, they're ready for their first bite of food, their first meal. And from that moment, everything goes quickly. By just 2 weeks old, they're able to thermoregulate on their own. They can keep their own body temperature up. They can eat from a bowl. By 3 weeks, they can stand, they can hop around. They can't quite fly, but they're ready to be moved to the release site. And the next step is very important for a young raptor, because raptors have a short window of development where they need to learn essential skills to survive on their own in the wild, to learn how to hunt and avoid predators. So at just 4 weeks old, we release them into the wild. Now, it's not as intense as it sounds. Really, we open the nest box and they kind of waddle out and they flap their wings and they sunbathe for a little while and then they just go back in and go to sleep. But we spend the next 2 to 3 months taking care of them. We provide them food. We look after them. We try to keep predators away as best we can. And during that time, they learn to fly really well. They chase each other. They learn how to hunt on their own. And when they're ready, they disperse on their own into the wild. By the 3rd year of this recovery effort, 100% of the eggs we collected from the wild hatched successfully in our care. 90% of the young that we released successfully fledged and made it to independence. Additionally, to provide that second clutch, the ones that are still in the wild, the best chance of survival, we apply a preventative treatment to the nests. This helps protect the young from parasitic flies. Since the initiation of these combined efforts, the observed population of Puerto Rican sharp-shinned hawks has doubled, and we continue to find hawks that we hand-raised and released in the wild. They're not only surviving on their own, but they are now breeding on their own in the wild. And although I'm hugely proud that we're able to grow this resilient and robust population, we may still be just buying time, because the hit from another hurricane could set us back to the beginning or even worse. But we can do more. With the support from Future for Nature, we can increase our impact by growing local capacity in Puerto Rico for raptor conservation. With more people, equipment, tools, my team, who's on the ground right now, today, saving this species, can have a greater impact. My dream is to see this population grow back to the numbers of the 1980s, but it's also to turn this project over to the hands of the locals, who are the natural stewards of the species and this forest. From the moment I held the first tiny nestling in my hand, it was very delicate, it was very small. I could feel or sense his stubborn heartbeat, and I realized in that moment that this is what hope feels like. So thank you all for supporting us. Thank you for everything you do, for believing in us. And most of all, thank you to the Sharpies and my amazing team in Puerto Rico.
I really thought I wouldn't cry this year. Hana, you did it. Well, on that theme of flying on the wings of hope, we are going to go now to see Alona Prilutska in Ukraine, whom we left in such a desperate situation last year. But this year, she sent us a very different video of the latest bat release festival, the 12th that's just taken place. Although the winter proved to be a particularly challenging time for the Bat Rehabilitation Center in Kharkiv, Alona's team rescued over 6,000 bats from across the country. Many were badly undernourished, but this spring they were released back into their natural habitat across 10 different cities in Ukraine. And many volunteers came to help. As these bats flew up into the air and back into freedom, it was a profoundly significant moment for all. Well, now we go back to our incredible Future for Nature family, who I've had the enormous privilege over the last 17 years to witness growing, and to see also the extraordinary cross-pollination of ideas, wisdom that is shared, and the synergy that comes from them working together. It is truly inspiring. And thanks to Future for Nature funding, we're now able to bring them together more often and allow their collaborations to really take off and fly. So the Wings for Wildlife project that Vitsa talked about earlier is now going global in collaboration with Barbara Galetti, Trang Nguyen, Corneille Ewango, and Geraldine Verhan in Chile, Congo, Nepal, and Vietnam, all of them working together to see how aviation can help wildlife conservation. Then we have Fernanda Abra from Brazil, who's joined forces with Els van Lavieren, who's actually here in the audience with us today, to try to better understand the impact of roads on wildlife in Suriname, and together they're co-designing solutions to prevent this. Back to Maggie Mermans up there, working with Inza Kone, trying to develop a tool for community involvement in conservation planning in Côte d'Ivoire, working together with great success, and many more beyond this. Something that we really can truly be very proud of. So that brings us now back to here, Arnhem, where it all began all that time ago. and to hear at last from our guest of honor, John Liu. Well, John is a visionary environmental filmmaker, ecologist, and sustainability advocate whose work has profoundly influenced global conversations on ecological restoration and regenerative development. With a career spanning decades, he's dedicated himself to documenting and catalyzing large-scale ecosystem restoration projects around the world. His groundbreaking documentary films, including Green Gold and Hope in a Changing Climate, have not only showcased the remarkable potential for restoring degraded landscapes, but have also inspired action and policy change at local, national, and international levels. John's holistic approach to restoration emphasizes the interconnectedness of ecosystems, communities, and economies, highlighting the critical role of regenerative practices in creating a sustainable future for our planet. We're absolutely thrilled to have him here with us today. John, welcome to the stage.
Oh dear. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful to the organizers and also to Common Land Foundation and the Mustard Seed Trust for helping me to continue to do this work. And thank you to the awardees for their wonderful work and inspiration. I think when we think about the future of nature, we also need to think about the past. And we have to realize that the Earth that we live on is the only planet that we know of that has an oxygenated atmosphere, a freshwater system, fertile soils, and an amazing biodiversity. And it is this symbiotic relationships between all the different life forms, from microbial life forms like these filamentous fungi, which are making mineral nutrients bioavailable to plant life, and the photosynthesis that allows for an oxygenated atmosphere and symbiotic relationships between different types of life forms. And all of these things have come about long before there were human beings. And so we benefit from this amazing evolutionary succession. And this evolutionary succession has led to such incredible beauty and such intricate interconnectivity. And somehow we need to remember this. We need to have it firmly in our mind that we only exist because of all the symbiotic relationships between all life. And somehow we have diverged. We've taken different paths. And the paths over historical time have led us to different kinds of thoughts that were not about nature, but about what we could get. Now, as a young person, I was a television cameraman, and in 1994, I went to the Lutz Plateau in the upper and middle reaches of the Yellow River. And when I saw this, after 17 years of journalism, I realized that ecology was more important than the geopolitical events that I'd been covering. And those geopolitical events were the major stories of the late 20th century, like the rise of China from poverty and isolation, terrorism, Tiananmen, the collapse of the Soviet Union. But when I saw this, I thought, how is it possible that human beings have destroyed the beauty and the functionality of the earth? What made this happen? How did we do that? And I realized that in documenting this, in focusing on it, I could understand that there were principles. And these principles were, in evolutionary succession, were always more biomass, always more necromass as each generation of life died and gave up its body to nurture the next generations, and always more biodiversity. And that took billions of years. But in just a few tens of thousands of years, human beings had begun to massively change the surface of the Earth. And in doing that, change the surface temperatures. If the solar radiation directly hits the surface of the Earth, that's like going back billions of years. It's more like Mars or the moon, because the entire planet was colonized by life. And I realized that this wasn't only China. Everywhere in the world that went in this direction had the same outcome. And that each of the civilizations that destroyed their ecology failed. And that now we're at this same point. But we're 8 billion people on a planetary scale. But in my study of the Chinese, I saw that they realized what was going on, and they found that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. So this, from 1994, this is 2009. So 15 years, they were able to take a massively degraded system over a vast area, approximately the size of the Netherlands, and restore it to ecological health. And this brought back natural zones, and it brought back more productivity in agricultural zones, and brought back the hydrological cycle, brought back biodiversity, and brought back hope and fundamental happiness for so many people who had been miserable. And I started to think, all I really need to do for the rest of my life is understand this. And we need, collectively, to have a shared understanding, shared intelligence about this, and a shared intention to restore all degraded lands on the planet. I've called this the great work of our time. And what I've seen is we can do this. We can restore soils rapidly. In many soil programs in universities, they say it takes thousands of years to make a tiny amount of soil. No, it doesn't. It takes billions of years, millions of years to make sediments in subsoils. You can, in 17 days, grow humus rapidly if you know what you're doing. And it takes huge numbers of people to do this. And in the places where people are focused on this, it's effective. And it's also more valuable than anything else we could do. And what we've done over the last Common Land Foundation has been working all over the world, and we've also created ecosystem restoration communities around the world. And people all over the world are willing to take this on. And if we all take this on, and then we realize that actually functional ecosystems are more valuable than things, then we could have a new economy. We could realize that what's truly valuable is life, and things actually end up on the trash heap. And it's an illusion to imagine that things are more valuable than life itself. And that we need to look across time. And so the future of nature is about our consciousness, because our consciousness is determining the landscape now. So we're equaling cosmic forces or geologic forces. And we need to see and understand the value and the beauty and the relationship that we have with one another and the relationship that we have with all life on the earth. We have to realize that life, being born on the earth, is a birthright. You don't have to buy your rights. Every living being is a representation of all life since the beginning of time. And our ancestors have left messages for us about the sacredness of life. And we need to listen to them. And we need to realize that we are here now, but we're just passing through. You know, there's a long succession of life, and there is a future coming. And we're really just stardust. So it's a great honor and pleasure to meet these wonderful young people. I'm no longer young, sadly. But I'm very glad to be here, and I hope I've been able to share a little bit about what I've learned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I am now going to ask you to come back up onto the stage because we have the awards to give to our awardees. So could I please, would you come here? Could I please ask, first of all, Callie to come up onto the stage? There you go. Welcome.
Congratulations.
Smile. Woohoo! Come over here. Take that. And could I please now have Rinzin?
Rinzin.
Take the.
There you go. Congratulations.
And finally, last but far from least, Hana.
Congratulations.
All right, could you all come back together? We're going to do one more picture, just everyone together. Come into the middle. Hana, you come in the middle. There we go. Actually, Rinzin, come over here. Let's split up, boys and girls. Come over. Okay, you'll do like that, whatever. Thank you all so much. Well done. Well done.
Congratulations.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much. We have now come to the end of this wonderful event. We are enormously proud to be able to continue to support young champions like these three today. And so please do now take this opportunity to join hands with Future for Nature. It is a truly worthy cause. And thanks to all of our speakers again for their incredible contributions. In a second, we're going to head out into the foyer to go and have some drinks, some celebratory drinks together. There's some merchandise you can buy, which all goes towards Future for Nature. But far more important than that, please, if you haven't done it already, make a hefty donation. That's what we'd really like. So thank you all. Bye-bye. So So I must just ask the National Committee, International Committee, our winners, and the board and everyone to please come onto the stage for some photographs. And we'll see you all out there for a really nice drink. Please don't finish all the champagne.